So we're starting now, right? Well, welcome to Sfarim וסופרים. This is, I'm going to call it the first shiur, the first lesson. We'll review a little from the other one. The last class that we had was more of an introduction. And so just as a synopsis, what we will be speaking about today, and it's possible that we're not going to finish it today, but today's Yud Beis Iyar, and it's a couple days before Pesach Sheni. The first section of it is a Devarim Shebal Peh Iyata Rishai La'imran Biksav. Things, you have the Torah Shebal Peh and you have the Torah Shebiksav. The Torah Shebiksav you cannot say Bal Peh. The Torah Shebal Peh you cannot write it down. This is the first topic that we'll be talking about, and we did mention it last time, but we will review. In Mirz Hashem, there will be many shiurim, and some of these topics are going to the people that we're going to talk about, the giants that we're going to be speaking about, the G'dolei Yisrael, the Rishonim, the Achrayim. Today we're going to talk a little about the Ga'onim. So this is something that will continue in Mirz Hashem, and it's also something that I've developed throughout the years, and based on different Sfarim that I saw, based on you could say my mentor, who we were working on the Sefer Hamavi L'Sifrei HaRambam. So we had many discussions about this. So there's one particular theme, and that is the difference between Sfard and Ashkenaz. So we'll be also speaking about that. And everything that we do over here is, the motto would be Ten L'Chacham. Actually, I copied this in from Word the last minute into Google Docs, so please don't mind this. But Ten L'Chacham V'Yachkeim Oid. That the material that I'm giving you is to get you jump-started, that you should be able to do research yourself. You should learn yourself. And that really is the best satisfaction anybody could have. Instead of just spoon-feeding the material, I'm going to show you over here the different tools that we have in order that you as a chacham, as a wise person, could take the next step forward and to do research. Once again, if you have any questions whatsoever, and the Mirz Hashem will also get this up on my website, on my shazak.com website. We'll have a separate section, Sfarim וסופרים, but this will take a little time to get going. Regardless, if you have any questions, info@shazak.com. Please don't call me, but in Mirz Hashem, we're also going to be having a WhatsApp group. So let me begin today's share with a Dvar Torah. Yud Beis Iyar is today, coming up on Thursday. Actually, during the season that I'm inside the whole time, I wake up in the morning, and the most kavanah that I have to have during davening is Hayom Yom, to figure out, is today Monday, today's Thursday, today's Wednesday, because every day seems just about the same, regardless. So on Thursday is Pesach Sheni. There is a vart from Hayom Yom. Hayom Yom is the sefer that Chabad use every day. And let's see, hopefully this will work. Going here. This is Hayom Yom. So what Hayom Yom is just vertelach, a vart that you could live with that entire day, that the Lubavitcher Rebbe compiled before he was Rebbe. Now also I'm going to be showing you different links and using a lot Wikipedia in Hebrew, and I was debating whether I should show in Hebrew or show in English, but it's really your call. If I have a lot of requests that it should be in English, it's fine with me. So let's get back over here. So in Hayom Yom of Pesach Sheni, it says, there's a vart that says, Pesach Sheni, the idea, we know what Pesach Sheni is. I don't have to give you that foundation, but what is the lesson of Pesach Sheni on Yudalad Iyar? That's Nishdakim Farfallen. No such thing as a lost cause. If you didn't do it right the first time, you always get another chance, a second chance. Nishdakim Farfallen is a very famous word. There's no lost cause. When I used to teach, I was hoping when I would tell the students this, they wouldn't ask me a question, because there is a question that bothered me throughout the years. And what do you mean there's no such thing as a lost cause? Of course there is. There's no such thing as a Pesach Shlishi or a Pesach Revi or a Pesach Hamishi. You have one more chance. What does it mean, Pesach Sheni, Sinishdakim Farfallen? Obviously, if somebody missed Pesach Sheni, there's not another chance. If somebody missed the carbon, they were Tameh, Yudalad Nisan, came along the next month, Yudalad Iyar, they didn't arrive and they didn't bring the carbon. So if they show up on Tesvav Iyar the next day, sorry. So there is no Pesach Shlishi. So what's going on? It was Hashgacha Pratis a few years ago. I met somebody in Crown Heights. I went to one shul, it was locked. So I happened to go to another shul. I forgot his name, but he came over to me. It was beautiful. He says, you want to hear a Dvar Torah? And this was the Dvar Torah. This was the question that he asked. The answer they gave is so beautiful. And that is, when the Bnei Yisrael came over to Moshe Rabbeinu, they had a problem. They went to the Nasi. They went to Moshe Rabbeinu. That is the lesson of Pesach Sheni. Sinishdakin Farfallen. In any situation you are, you always have the recourse, and that is to go over to the Moshe Rabbeinu. Go over to your Rebbe. Go over to your Mashpia. Go over to somebody who can help you. How do we learn this from? Pesach Sheni. That's what Bnei Yisrael did. They had a problem, they went to Moshe Rabbeinu. The Bnei Slavchad had a problem, they went to Moshe Rabbeinu. So that is the Dvar Torah I like to start with over here. Now, this is Google Docs. As I said before, we're going to be using many, many different tools. I don't know if you see over here. You could see this is a Bar Ilan. So I was using that last time, the Bar Ilan. And that's one way that you could be searching many, many different things. Let's say you want to search, as we said before, Devarim Biksav. So I'm searching all databases, and I'm not searching for the exact words. So let's see what comes up. And the first thing comes up, Gittin Daf Samach Amid Beis. So here's one tool that I have that in this Bar Ilan, you could always right click, and you can see all the different mefarshim, and the Mirza Hashem will be talking about many of these different mefarshim. You could select all Rishonim, just the Rishonim, and you could bring up over here what they say on it. You have Rashi, and as you scroll down, you see the other mefarshim like Chidushei HaRashba, Chidushei HaRitva. So this is actually a wonderful, wonderful tool. So when I was doing this just before preparing for the shiur, I was thinking, well, I have so many different links. So what's the best way to go about it? So I brought this into Google Docs, and you click over here and it takes you to this. So while I'm giving the shiur, I will have an outline of what we'll be talking about. And very simply, I'll be able to bring up the different links that I have here. So when I was doing that, it reminded me of something so interesting. And we call this, let's say I'm going to bring this up right now. So we all know we're in the 21st century. We know that this is called the internet. This is the internet. This is World Wide Web, www. The truth of the matter is, if we think about it, or we look into it, we could see that actually the time that we're spending most of our day learning Torah, a major chunk of that is learning Mishnah and learning Gemara. Now, Gemara itself is divided into different tractates. And what's a tractate? A section, a book. There, we say that there are 60 shishim mesechtas. One meseches, or we call it mesechta in Aramaic, is one tractate. But where is that word from? So I'm going to click over here onto Wikipedia. Meseches, and I knew this before, I didn't need Wikipedia for that, but it's so interesting that the Shirish Hamila, we could call it, what is the source of the word, the Shirish Hamila. So we see from a pasuk that talks about somebody who weaves threads. Vayemer aleh, there's a pasuk in Shoftim. There's a pasuk in Shoftim, Perek Tazayim, pasuk Yud Gimel. Vayemer aleh, im targia sheva machlefes roshi, im hamaseches. So basically what a maseches is, like a web, like someone who is combining things together. Think of it like a spider web. A spider web, I don't have to bring up a picture of a spider web, but it has lines and it goes from one place to another place to another place. And that's what the web is, somebody who's weaving something. There are many, many threads attaching. And what happens? So what is a Maseches? A Maseches is that book, that Sefer, that Gemara that has in itself many, many different words. But think about the Gemara. What happens during the Gemara when you're learning a Daf Gemara? What happens? It happens is somebody mentions one thing, and Amira mentions one thing. That takes you on a tangent to another thing, which takes you to another thing, which takes you to another thing. That's exactly what Gemara is all about. It's the discussion. It's the elaboration of Torah Shabal Peh. That's called of Torah Shabiksav. It's called Torah Shabal Peh. I don't know. How does this line get over here? And how do we get rid of it? I have no idea. I didn't do that. Hopefully it could go away. No. Oh, there we go. Of Torah Shabal Peh. So this is what a Maseches is. This is what Gemara is. Gemara is the web, the holy web, where you, so to say, click on it. The Amoraim didn't need any clicks. They had it in their head, and they would go from one thing to another. So that's, by the way, with Maseches. Now we're going to start our first topic over here. I thought I did know Zoom well, but obviously I don't. I was thinking if I could see the chats, and I do not see any of the chats. I don't really know how that works. So if you, once again, if you have any questions, you could let me know. You could let me know by email. Okay, so now we're going to start our first topic over here. The Gemara says, Dvarim Shabal Peh, things which are oral, you're not allowed to write down. This is something which is biksav. What is ksav? Think to yourself, this is mikra. This is the Torah. The words of the Torah, you cannot, Dvarim shabiksav iyatarashai laimran bal peh. That's the things of the Torah you can't say by heart. And the flip side of it, Dvarim Shabal Peh, if something is Bal Peh, in other words, Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Har Sinai, and there he was taught all about the 613 mitzvahs. Let's say one of the mitzvahs is tefillin. So what does it say in the pasuk? So what do we know from that? We don't know much. We have absolutely no clue what that means. How does that merge? How does that become the tefillin that we're wearing today? So the answer is that's Torah Shabal Peh. This is what Hashem told Moshe Bal Peh orally, and then there was another thing, and that is he must tell that orally to the next generation. That's what we start with Pirkei Avos. Moshe kibel Torah misinai u'masara liYeshua, and Yeshua is Canaan, and it keeps on going from one generation to generation. Do not write it down. Dvarim Shabal Peh, you're not allowed to write it down. So this is what happened. As we spoke about last time, and I'm going to go through it briefly, the problem with that, of course, is that it's like the game I mentioned last time. It's like the game of telephone. You start off with one thing, and by the time the fifth person gets to it, it's completely different. It changes. So as generations progressed, and they were further away from the Messiah from Moshe Rabbeinu, so then started to be different opinions. And it came to such a situation that they said, you know what, if this is the case, then Eis Lasis Lashem Heferu Tarasecha. We have to, and I'm looking here for my Barilan. Hopefully I can find it, yeah. Eis Lasis Lashem Heferu Tarasecha. Let's say Eis Lasis. Eis Lasis Lashem is a pasuk in Tehillim Perek Kuf Yud Tes. So came along Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, and he says, if that's the case, we're going to completely forget about Torah. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, he compiled the Mishnah. Otherwise, people will forget the Torah completely. Okay, so what happened was that Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi wrote it down and compiled it in the Mishnah. But before we get to that, we all know what the Mishnah is. I'm going to ask you a question. Let me be like a teacher. Think to yourself, what is the reason why it was so important that Dvarim Shabal Peh, you should not write it down? There's so much information there. You're talking about Taryag mitzvahs. Just think to yourself, you have the Mishnah Torah of the Rambam is in 14 halakim, and that's only the halacha part of it. How is it possible for a person to remember everything? Why is it so important not to write it down? And this is key. In order to understand this, think about it a little. I would ask for different remarks, but I want you to think about it. And I'll begin talking about at least my ideas that I had. Some of it, perhaps I heard from other people, but this is an essential question. For what reason, Dvarim Shabal Peh, Yata Rishai Laimran, Biksav? Why can't you write it down? So here comes when actually will be related to the second part of the shiur, whether today or not, the difference between Sfard and Ashkenaz and the whole Hashkafa. So let me begin by saying that if a person wants to collect Sfarim, we have plenty of Sfarim nowadays. There's every week comes out, who knows, 100 new Sfarim. But if a person wants to collect Sfarim, a very good idea that the person should do is go to families where somebody passes away, and the best thing is a family that is not really, not at this point religious, but they have a father, perhaps they have a grandfather or a great-grandfather, and it was given down from one generation to the next generation, these holy books. And people don't even know that they exist. Let me give you an example. At a different share, I'll talk more about it. But there are certain Svarim that were disappeared from Klal Yisrael. Many Svarim disappeared. Perhaps you could say from before the time of the printing press, perhaps you could say that most of the Svarim disappeared. When we say a Ksav Yad, it doesn't mean that it was written by the author. A Ksav Yad means that it was copied before the printing press. Let's say the printing press came about in the late 1400s. And before that, people would copy Svarim. There's, as I said, certain Svarim disappeared, especially, I don't have a link for it now, especially from, let's see if we could do this, especially from Provence. Provence, France. Provence, France. So here, images, let's go back one. Wikipedia is best. Okay, Provence is southern France. There are a lot of Gedolei Yisrael that lived in Provence, in southern France. Amongst them, the Ravid and Rabbi Yonasan Milunil, Reb Zrachia Halevi, perhaps these names are known to you. And it was this was the place, this was the Makom Torah. Actually, the Rambam wrote to Rabbi Yonasan HaKohen Milunil, he says, Torah basically is gone, if not for you and your students in Lunil. That's what the Rambam wrote. Anyways, another person who lived there was Rabbeinu Menachem HaMeiri. Rabbeinu Menachem HaMeiri lived, to our readers over there. Okay, let's see if it's going to come up here. Okay, Rabbeinu Menachem ben Shlomo Mishpachas HaMeiri. He lived in the 1200s. He wrote Beis HaBchira. The Sfarim that he wrote were lost, basically. We had a Sefer here, a Sefer there. This is on Shas. And the Meiri, we'll talk about him a different time, but the Meiri takes a person by the hand, more so than Rashi, we could say. And he's like your partner teacher who teaches you in such a beautiful language, the Gemara. The problem is that they were lost until Hameya Asrim, until the 20th century. There's a whole story about how they found it, but I'll tell you, Bekitzer, they found it in somebody's attic. That's where they found the whole set. That's one copy, one manuscript of the Meiri was found in somebody's attic. And it was all dusty and everything. That's how we have the Meiri today. If we had the Meiri from the time that he wrote it until today, it would be even a lot more popular. But Pasha, we did not have it. We did not have access to it. So what am I saying? Let me go back to original statement. And that is that Dvarim Shabal Peh to Rishonim. Why is it important? If a person wants to collect Sfarim, go to those people who are not interested in Sfarim, yet they have Sfarim from their parents, from their grandparents and great-grandparents. You go over to them and you say, could I please have your holy books, your Jewish books? And they'll say, why, of course. Take it off. It's taking up too much space. You have no idea what treasures you could find over there. We're not talking about monetary, but it also could be worth a lot of money. But besides for that, kisvei yad, manuscripts that you could have there. So why are they giving it up? The answer is that's the difference between Torah Shebal Peh and Torah Shebiksav. If you only have something which is written, there is a big danger to that. How many times you go into people's houses and they're bayis malei svarim, full of svarim, but they're all new. Why are they all new? They're not used. Why aren't they used? Because it's there on the bookshelf. If they ever want it, they could take a look at it. They could see it. So there you go. It's the difference between static and dynamic. Static means these people, whatever their names are, they have from their Zayda Sfarim over there. It's static. It's on the bookshelf. It's in the attic over there. It's not moving. There's no reason. However, when the Chazal said, Dvarim Shebal Peh Iyater Rishai La'imram Biksav, you cannot write it down. They meant nothing could be static. If you wanted to give it to the next generation, you can't give it to them as a book. You have to speak to them. You have to have a relationship with them. You have to constantly review the material, because if you don't review the material, you're going to forget it. So it's a constant pressure for you, but that pressure is good. The pressure is good because that guarantees the success of the future generations, that they're also going to, they can't, I don't know if they're able to study everything, to know everything by heart, but at least the things that are negated to them, they have to constantly review and give it over to the next generation. So there we have a couple ideas. Number one, hopefully I could print in English, static versus dynamic. That's number one. Number two, it could be also the difference between the chayas that you have, enthusiasm. How can you be enthusiastic? How can you learn how to spell right? Nowadays you don't need to. No, that's not my question. How could you be enthusiastic about a book? You could be excited about a book, and I don't know how long the excitement is going to last, and I don't know how long our attention spans are, but if it's just something that's written, it lacks the enthusiasm involved in that also. So that's another point. The other point is the Messiah. The Messiah is the tradition. That means, think of it, Moshe Rabbeinu is the 100% Messiah. He's the beginning of the Messiah. And then it goes to the next generation and to the next generation. So if it's only written down in a book, there's really no connection to the Messiah. It's written, whatever is written over there. If you have that chain, the chain could be with people, not with books. The chain has to continue. When Moshe Rabbeinu gave it over to Aaron, who then gave it over to the next generation, or Yeshua, and to the next generation, the way that he said that Moshe Rabbeinu said it, you can't write that in the book. You don't even have exclamation marks in Torah Shabbat in the Mikra. You don't have question marks over there. You don't have symbols. You don't have emojis, as far as I know. I don't know. We don't have tons of things over there. So how do you know that's called, I think, the inflection or something like that? You don't have that. However, you could always remember, this is the way that my teacher presented something. I recall I learned in Morristown, and Harav Melech Tzvibel, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, was the mashpia. And all of a sudden, one time, he said he's going to have a special Farbrengen, and the Farbrengen is going to teach a particular sikha that just came out. And we also know that Ramelech Tzvibel was one of the people who was involved in actually editing the sikhs for the Rebbe. There were different people who were doing that. So remember that time that there was a special Farbrengen, and he talked about that sikha, and it was like receiving it, Torah Sheba'al Peh, Mipi Agvura. It was unbelievable. Why? Because he showed us the importance of that and pointed out something which was, you could say, like a game changer, that sikha. What would be if I got the sikha in the mail and I looked at it and I'm enthusiastic, whatever, or I don't understand all the nuances of it? That's because it's only biksav. It's missing the Baal Peh. It's missing the Messiah. It's missing the enthusiasm. It's missing that chain. And the further you go away from the chain, then you could say the more danger there is. So of breaking that chain or not having that. So that, by the way, B'derech Agav, is the differences between, we say that Amoira doesn't argue on a Tana in general. And Amoira doesn't argue with the Tana. The Tana is closer to the Moshe Rabbeinu. The Tana is more closer to the original. So that is the idea of Dvarim Sheba'al Peh. So, however, with all these advantages, there's also the disadvantage. And Chazal had to make that decision, and they said, it's wonderful, Torah Sheba'al Peh. It's great. It's phenomenal. However, let's be realistic. If it's going to continue like this, we're at a stage so many years later, after 2448, we're a couple thousand years after that. I don't know exactly the time frame. So we have a question, we have a danger that basically we're going to forget everything. If we forget everything, there goes Judaism. We have to continue it. So therefore they said, Eis lasis la Hashem heferu tirisacha. However, not so fast. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi was the one who compiled the Mishnah. We mentioned before, Harav Ruvain Margolius, a tremendous Talmud Chacham, and what I like about Wikipedia is that you have external links. So you could see over here different Sfarim that he wrote, different articles that he wrote, and one of these Sfarim, actually, I'm looking at this now, Shiloh Setshuvas Min HaShamayim, we'll talk about it in a different lesson, but he wrote a tremendous Hakdama, introduction to Shiloh Setshuvas Min HaShamayim, saying, how can we paskin? There was this one of this Baal Taisvis, and basically he asked the question and went to sleep. He woke up in the morning, he got his answer. And so he wrote a tremendous Hakdamas to Muhammad Hashem of Rabbeinu Avram ben Arambam. But the sefer that he wrote, look at all these different Sfarim, is, I don't see it over here. Now here I see it. And you can get it in Hebrew books. And that's Yisayda Mishnah Varichasa. So you go in Hebrew books and you could, that's the link to Hebrew books. We don't want that. So anyways, here we have the link in Hebrew books. Yisayda Mishnah Varichasa. So here's another amazing website that you should use. And HebrewBooks.org. I met the person who put this all together. Incredible work that he did. And you should know that thousands upon thousands of Sfarim are taken from the Rebbe's library. A lot of them is a stamp, Oyo Yosef Yitzchak Lubavitch. And it's put up over here. You could download the whole sefer. This particular sefer is not very long. You could download it, or you could read it online. Here you have the different pages. You go to the different pages. You could make it also smaller. So you don't really need for this Eitzer HaChachma. But here in his Hakdama, he talks about this whole idea of the Mishnah, going back here. And you say that Mishnah Varichasa, he speaks, well, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi came along, and that was the danger, Eis lasis la Hashem. So he said, okay, I'm going to put together the Mishnah, but not so fast. Not so fast. You can't write down, you can't get rid of this Dvarim Sheba'al Peh, Iyat Rishai La'imran Biksav. You can't get rid of it so fast. You have to continue the Messiah. Let me give you another example. Example is where something broke off the Messiah. There's something that we know that's called Kabbalah. Okay, Hasidus is based on Kabbalah. So we're not going to talk about it, but you heard about Kabbalah. You heard about the Zohar. You heard about all the different Kabbalah Sfarim. Why is it called Kabbalah? It's called Kabbalah simply because Kabbalah means receiving from one generation to the next. It's something for Yechidei Skula, for special people. It's not for everybody. Therefore, the Kabbalah was not accessible to everybody on purpose. You had to have the Kabbalah. You had to have a Rebbe. And it's very dangerous to learn Kabbalah if you don't have the proper, so to say, Messiah. So along comes, so let's say Kabbalah, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai wrote the Zohar. Just that you should know that Reb Yaakov Emden wrote in his Sefer, well, not everything Reb Shimon Bar Yochai wrote. The Zayir that we also have from later dates, also something else. Rabbi Yaakov Emden, we'll speak about him at a different time. So the Arizal came along, and the Arizal came along in the 16th century. Rabbi Yitzchak Luria in the 16th century, and he says, mitzvah legalais zois hachachma. He's buried in Tzfas. Over here, you have the Ramak was his Rebbe. Shlomo Alkavitz was the Beis Yosef's brother-in-law. Here you have the picture of the Arizal. Migodol, mikubali. So he says, mitzvah legalai zois hachachma. At that time, he changed. And just like, perhaps we could compare it to, I don't know if you can compare exactly, but the same thing Rabbi Yehuda Nasi did with the Mishnah. Dvarim shabal peyater shayloimrim biksav, eis lasis Hashem. The same thing that Arizal did, because he saw that there was a need for it, a necessity for that. Comes along, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi did the Mishnah, but the Mishnah is very cryptic. That means it's like a mystery when you're learning the Mishnah. Not everything is 100% clear. So what he did was he wrote it as if, and we spoke about last time also, he didn't write everything that's necessary. When you start off the Mishnah, then you have Me'emasai Karen Shema Ba'arvis. He's not telling you what the Shema is all about. He's just telling you about these different points that you got to know. He's not going to tell you everything. They were written in a way like notes. Notes is, if you're listening to a shir from somebody, if you're listening to a lesson and you're writing notes, you look at the note and you wrote bekitzer, you wrote very briefly, you take a look at these couple words and you know what's the whole thing talking about. That's notes. If you give those notes to somebody else, they'll have no clue. That's what Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi wanted to do. What Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi wanted to do was to write the Mishnah in a way like notes, just taking notes. So you look at the notes and it will remind you about everything that the Torah Shabbat Peh that you heard from beforehand. But Dafka did not want to write it so clear. Therefore, we have many times Chisure Mechsera. We have 785 occurrences throughout the Gemara. Chisure Mechsera, it's missing a couple words. V'hachiktani. So if Chisure Mechsera v'hachiktani, why didn't they learn it? Why wasn't he clear? The answer is he wasn't clear on purpose. I don't know if this is the Chiddush of Rabbi Margolius or he took it from somebody else or other people who wrote about the Mishnah beforehand. Okay. So that is that generation. We didn't do a complete breakthrough in Dvarim Shabal Peh, Yater Rishayla Oimrim Biksav. It was not a complete breakthrough. It was just notes. As time progressed, we're soon going to get to a couple other interesting things, but as time progressed, just like from Moshe Rabbeinu, the Torah Shabal Peh started with Moshe Rabbeinu, and it was great the first few generations, and then as time progressed, things got out of hand. The same thing also with the Mishnah, that no longer were they able to look at the notes of the Mishnah and understand. That's why you had many discussions. What's the discussions? The discussions of the Gemara. What is Gemara basically? Gemara is a base medrash in a certain area in Bavel for the Talmud Bavli, or in Eretz Yisrael. I think it's Tveria for Talmud Yerushalmi. I don't think Talmud Yerushalmi has anything to do with Yerushalayim, if I'm not mistaken. If I am, let me know. But it was basically in the northern region of Eretz Yisrael, Talmud Yerushalmi, basically discussion groups. So you have a breakout group of discussion, and they're talking about, hey, what does it say in the Mishnah? What does it mean over here? What is that? And finally, they came along, Ravina and Rav Ashi, after several generations, let's say the year around 500, and they said, Adkan, let's write down all these discussions. What are the discussions of the Torah Shabbat Peh? I think Mishnah, by the way, is more of a stress to learn the words of the Mishnah Baal Peh. Not so much Gemara. Not saying not. There are people who know the whole Gemara Baal Peh. It's because they have a phenomenal memory. But actually to learn Mishnah Baal Peh, Mishnayos Baal Peh is a big thing. Perhaps you could say, I don't know if I heard it from anybody, perhaps you could say that's because Mishnah has more of a connection to the Torah Shebaal Peh. And it's the words also, it's like a blend of Torah Shebiksav and Torah Shebaal Peh. The words are important, saying it Baal Peh are important. Okay, I digress, and that's what I do. It's Maseches. You go from one thing to the next. That's why I had to write the notes over here. So we're going to continue with this. The idea is Baal Peh did not stop, even after the Gemara. But before that, let's talk about this idea of Baal Peh. So we said the ideas of the Mishnah beforehand, halachas, but it's not only halacha that we're talking about. And I don't want to forget, by the way, that this, I'm just going to highlight it here that you should know, this could we actually, I wonder, could we go in the text and we could highlight the text color? No. That's the text. Highlight. Forget about that. Oh, highlight this. Okay, good. We're learning. We learned jetzt Google Docs. Okay, this was like the Shiurim from Rabbi Mentlik. He taught us Microsoft Word and Google Docs. Anyways, don't mind my sense of humor. This static versus dynamic is going to be very, very important for the next step, which is between Sfard and Ashkenaz. Okay, so just don't want to forget that. Let us continue now, and it seems that we'll continue through here, and maybe Shir Gimel, the next share will be between Sfard and Ashkenaz. I won't review this, what we're doing right now. So let us continue over here. The Seder, when we're talking about Peh, so let's think about it. I'll show you something very interesting. We have Simonei HaSeder. So what's the Simonim of the Seder? Kadesh Urchatz, and we could sing it, Kadesh Urchatz, Karpas Yachatz, all different tunes and everything. Do we ever think about what's behind the words of the Seder? And why is it called Seder? So the answer seems to me simple. And that is, sometimes we get into pshetlach and we forget about the simple explanation. So let me tell you a pshetel right now. I'll tell you this. And that is, and it's written in Tzair Lateva, brought down in Tzair Lateva from the Vart of the Malakit over there. And the Vart is, what is Seder? We know that there are 4 parts to the Torah. 4 parts to the Torah. There is Shat, Remez, Drush, and Side. Ignore all. Okay. Shat, Remez, Drush, and Side. The simple explanation, the hint, the darshaning, exegesis, whatever you call it. I don't even know if I'm allowed to say that word on Zoom over here. And Side, the hidden part. So if you look at this, that's Pardes. So the question is, I'm telling you the pshetel. So the question is, what's the difference between Pesach and the whole year? The whole year that you have the mitzvah, L'man Tizkar Shem Tzeischa Me'eretz Mitzrayim. You have to remember every day going out of Mitzrayim. So what's the difference between the two? What comes along, Manishtana, what comes along on Pesach that is different? And we know that in the Rebbe's Haggadah, he talks about it, has 5 answers to it. So basically the idea is the ganze year, the whole year, is Pshat. However, on Pesach, we focus on the Remez, Drush, and Side. So take a look at that. Samach, Daled, Reish, Seder. And that's what Seder is. That is the Vart, but that's not really the Pshat. Okay? So that's why we call it Seder, because we're not focusing so much on the Pshat. If you want to know the Pshat, the simple thing of what happened on Pesach or before Pesach, you read out of Egypt and you have that a whole year. Just joking. But if you want to have the deeper part, that's the Seder. However, what's the real explanation? It seems that the simple explanation, going back to Torah Shabbal Peh, when the Seder started, whoever composed the Seder, you didn't have a Haggadah like we have. It's all part of the Torah Shabbal Peh. They had to remember what to do because they didn't have it written down. So they made, like the Mishnah, they made the notes. And the notes are, start with Kaddish, then you go to Orchatz. They didn't have a Haggadah. I see over here he writes, but Kufas Harishainim Chubrus Simanim Shainim Haggadah Shel Pesach. So I'm wondering if it's Kufas Harishainim or if it's beforehand. Maybe I'm wrong in what I'm saying, but it seems that even if I'm not so sure that this is correct, that's when they were Mechaber the Simanim. What I'm saying is that it was always like that. And the Torah Shabbal Peh that they had, they didn't really have the Haggadah Shel Pesach written because Dvarim Shabbal Peh, you're not allowed to including the Haggadah Shel Pesach. It could be I'm wrong. info@shazak.com. Let me know if I'm wrong. Shgiyos min Yavin. We spoke about last time that, you know what? You make a lot of mistakes. That's all part of the process. You have Lamites Malachis on Shabbos, and you have Ksiva, but also Mechika, Moichik, to erase things, is also a Malacha. It's all part of the process. So it could be I'm mistaken. Anyways, so that's a Seder Shel Pesach, Dvarim Shabbal Peh. I'll give you another thing. Siddur Tefillah. Where does the word Siddur come along? How do we get the word Siddur? And the answer is that, let's go over here. Siddur originally was, let's see if it's Hebrew or English. Okay, this one is in English. Siddur is originally from the Geonim. Now, we'll talk a little more about the Geonim in the next year. And in a nutshell, the Geonim lived in Bavel. There were two Talmudical academies. There was Surah and there was Pumbedisa. Rav Amram Gaon. So basically, you had these two yeshivas, Yarchei Kala. They came during the months of Adar for 1 month and the month of Elul beforehand, and they studied over there. Questions were asked by the Rosh Mesifta, and you also had a Reish Galutza. Reish Galutza was more the politician. He had to deal with the government, with taxes, and collect taxes, and to work with the government, and to provide sustenance to the yeshiva. So he was more the political figure. So anyways, Rav Amram Gaon, people would write questions. So what happened was that somebody wrote to him a letter. The Jews of Spain wrote him a letter, and they said, listen, tell us the order of our davening. Now let's get back to that. Siddur, Tefillah, the order of the davening. Because when people would be davening, they didn't have a siddur. There was, what was the purpose of the chazan? The purpose of the chazan was somebody who knew the tefillas well, and he would be the one to repeat it because you can't expect everyone did a good job the first time. That's why you have chazaras hashatz. I'm going to go to a side note, and the side note is that the Rambam in his time, he abolished chazaras hashatz, believe it or not. If you look into my sefer, it's online. If you look into my sefer, you could see over there the episode where people were talking so much during Chazaras Hashatz. So he got up one day, he punched on the table. I don't know if he punched on the table, but he said, no more Chazaras Hashatz. And that lasted for quite a while. It was only in his area. He didn't abolish it. You won't find in Mishnah Torah any halacha that it's going to say, well, if you guys are talking, then don't do Chazaras Hashatz. He didn't make it a halacha. However, he did for his specific area, and he said, no more Chazaras Hashatz. The one who brought it back was the Radvaz. The Radvaz is the one who brought it back a couple of 400 years later, around 300 years later. He brought it back, and he was, just like the Rambam was around 40 years in Mitzrayim, the Radvaz was also around 40 years. He wrote Shilos Uchuvas, over 3,000 of them. Unbelievable person. And of course, we'll be speaking about him also. So he decided in Mitzrayim, where he was the Rav, he's going to bring it back and therefore continue to have Chazaras Hashatz. Back to this. So what happened? The Jews of Spain, they wrote a letter to Rav Amram Goin and they said, hey, could you please tell us what's the order of the tefillah? He wrote back the letter and it was called Seder Shel Rav Amram Goin, just like Seder Shel Pesach. This is the order that he said, well, first you should daven this, then you should daven that. That was the first Siddur. Why didn't they have the Siddur before? Not so fast to have a Siddur. The same thing also happened with Reb Sadia Gaon. Now, Reb Sadia Gaon is a name that we heard so much, and he is unbelievable, Reb Sadia Gaon. He was also different amongst the Gaonim. As a side note, that all the Gaonim came from Bavel. Bavel is today's Iraq. They all came from Bavel. Besides Reb Sadia Gaon, he came from Mitzrayim. And that was because he was so unique. So they pushed aside their pride and they took Reb Sadia Gaon. So Reb Sadia Gaon also wrote a Siddur and a Seder Reb Sadia Gaon. And from that we get the Siddur. So from that we have all the different nuschos and everything. So far what did we learn? What's the reason for that? The Seder of Pesach was Baal Peh. Even what we daven is Baal Peh. And let's go to Mishnah Torah of the Rambam. So here, let me give you something here and open up a PDF. Okay. Anyone who wants this PDF, all you have to do is email me or WhatsApp me if you want. And basically what I did, I never printed it, but I wrote a sefer on the Rambam called Hamavi L'Sefer Rambam. You could get it. You'll be able to get that also in PDF on my website, the Mirz Hashem, but you could get it from the Yeshiva website. Anyways, the second sefer is Hakdama. The Rambam wrote Mishnah Torah, and he wrote 14 Sfarim. So the idea of this document, basically, is to give a synopsis, a mavai, an introduction to each sefer. So here in sefer, so you have Akdama Klolis, you have the introduction, general introduction, Psaikli Psukek. The Rambam started every sefer with a pasuk, and we explain what's the connection of the pasuk. So I'm giving a little plug for this. If somebody wants to sponsor printing of the book, I would appreciate it. Will help out a lot. Mikaris Sefer, Seder Mesudar, is why it's written a particular order that he had. You have different halachas that the Rambam wrote. Here is Seder Mesudar. Why does it start Hilchos Korban Pesach, then Hilchos Chagiga, Hilchos B'chayres, then it goes to the next one and the next one. Some of them we glean from the Magid Mishnah, talks about it. There's other Mefarshim, hardly anyone talks about it. However, we had to do a lot of thinking ourselves, and this is at least B'derech Efsher why it's a particular order. We know that the Rambam was very, very organized. So here we took different pninim from the Sefer, and we talked a little about that, but this is one thing that I wanted to discuss with you, and that is in connection with the idea of Baal Peh, of learning something by heart. So you may find it surprising, even after all of us who've been learning Mishnah Torah for such a long time, but let me tell you a secret. The secret is, it's not going to be so much of a secret now, that the Rambam, when he wrote the Mishnah Torah, he wanted that we should know it Baal Peh. That was the reason that was the thing that he wrote. And we have many different proofs to that. For example, the Rambam wanted to write it. By the way, I'm glad that I brought this up over here because I wrote this a while ago and I forget things. So the Mishnah, going back to the Mishnah was written according to some people. Bali Taisvis. The Mishnah in Tiferes Yisrael. Tiferes Yisrael, if you see over here, that's a pirush on the Mishnah. So it says, so he writes that the Mishnah was actually written with Nigina. Just like we have Tamei Nigina, we have Trup for Chumash. So the Mishnah was also written with Trup, with notes, sing-song. That's what he writes. Shahaya lahan zmiris miyuchan l'chol Mishnah Mishnah kidei lechazik ha-Mishnah bekoyach hazikaron. That goes back to what we originally said in the idea of Torah Shabbal Peh, a review on Nasi. He didn't want to do a complete breakaway. He wanted to write notes, but even more so, he wanted to keep the biksav of it and the Baal Peh of it. And that is by writing notes to it. So you should be singing the Mishnah. You should know it Baal Peh. L'kol hashir, l'koyol hashir amyuchad, leha Mishnah. The Shalah also writes about it. Ulezet timsa sifrei ha-Mishnah haktumim ksuvim im hanikud v'hataimim. Incredible. So back to the Rambam. So the Rambam, when he wrote in his Akdama for Sefer HaMitzvahs, V'nir Elisha Toiv Tiach Lukasa Sheyusam Halachas Halachas Kidei Sheyenekelo Daso Say Al Peh Lemisha Yirtza Oilisker Davar Mimeno. The Rambam wanted us to know it by Baal Peh. V'chol Peren Akdama. Every chapter I'm going to divide Lehilchos Ketanis Kidei Sheyiyu Siduran Al Peh. They should be known by heart. We mentioned before the Radvaz. How many tshuvas did he write? I'm glad you know. I'm glad you're listening. Over 3,000. Shalos tshuvas Radvaz. Somebody asked him a question. They said, why is it that the Rambam is telling us a certain thing and he's saying how many there are? Minyana limote mai. That's a lashon in the Gemara. The minyan, for what reason? Uladaiti, this is his answer. Uladaiti ein zu sheila b'divrei Rav Klal ki hu zal chiber chibura kidei sheyilmadu aisay al peh ulezeh tam chilik aisay prakim halachas v'aminyan mavai gadol v'simin l'schira v'lilma ra'inyan al peh v'arizeh pashut ma'od etzli. It was a pashut thing that the Rambam is writing different counts, and the reason he writes the counts is because they're mavai gadol v'simin l'schira, to remember it. So that, once again, I bring you this from Sfarim Wisoprim. By the way, we also speak about what is the connection from the last halacha of the sefer to the next one. The next sefer is Sefer Tahara. So we write about the connection. This is how organized he was. Getting back over here, we'll spend a few more minutes, and it's okay, because if you want to hang up, go ahead. I'm just looking at the screen right now. I have no idea what's going on in Zoom. Okay, so let's go to the next one. So he wrote over here, that Mishnah Torah Shal Rambam Baal Peh Amovai in Sefer Karbanis. We covered that. Now, what about Shulchan Aruch of Rabbi Yosef Cairo? What about that? It's also Baal Peh. Now, I did a couple months ago, I was giving a shiur. I give a shiur, or used to give a shiur before this Corona on Sfarim Wisofrim at the Free Synagogue in Chicago. That's a plug for Rabbi Levi Notek. And between Mincha and Maariv, we go through different Rishonim, and we did Beis Yosef, the Ramah, and everything, and the Rush and the Tour. So one thing that we said over there is when we're talking about Rabbi Yosef Cairo, so I mentioned, and I'm going to have to find it, and the Tour. The Rabbi Yosef Cairo, I think I'm going to have to find it for next time. But Rabbi Yosef Cairo wrote Beis Yosef, and then he wrote the Shulchan Aruch. So in Shulchan Aruch, let me see if I could find it. No, I'll just tell you this now. If somebody else could, if someone could just email me info@shazak.com, the source for what I'm going to say. The Shulchan Aruch, the Rabbi Yosef Cairo wrote in his introduction, he printed, there's 4 chalakim, there's 4 turim. He went after Rabbi Yaakov Balaturim. He went off after that organization. The organization is Eirachayim, Yehudeya, Avin Ezer, and Choshen Mishpat, 4 parts. In the introduction that Rabbi Yosef Cairo writes, and it's always good, and I implore you, look into the Hakdamas of the Sfarim, find out who wrote the Sefer, find out why they wrote the Sefer, find out what they wanted. It's so important. So in his introduction, he writes that I want everybody to learn Shulchan Aruch Baal Peh. I want you to learn the whole Shulchan Aruch. At first, I thought he meant only Arachayim, but I was wrong. He said Arachayim, Yehudeya, Avin Ezer, Choshen Mishpat, the whole Shulchan Aruch Baal Peh. Now, that's a lot, but he did something also to accomplish this. So let's go over here. At least see a picture of Shulchan Aruch, images, Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch, whoa, to learn the whole thing about Peh, Shulchan Aruch, that's impossible. Well, really not, because when the first printing of Shulchan Aruch, there was not many printings. There weren't any mefarshim. So therefore, it wasn't, if you look at the text itself, it's not that much. It's a lot more than Tehillim, but what Rabbi Yosef Cairo did, what he did was he also divided it up by days, just like we have that it's divided up by days. Our Tehillim, the same thing also is that he divided up by days. So therefore, in Ad Kan Yom Aleph, he put in a certain section, Ad Kan Yom Beis, Ad Kan, etc., and Yom Chaf Aleph. Now, so I'm skipping to Yom Chaf Aleph for a purpose. The purpose is to tell you something what happened. Only in the first printing of Shulchan Aruch did they actually put in something that Rabbi Yosef Cairo set up, Ad Kan Yom Aleph. And the printers did whatever they wanted. So they decided, okay, time to get rid of it. And they no longer had, and they deleted Ad Kan. They decided, it's only the first printing you have it. But look into the Hakdama, his introduction. He says clearly, I am writing the Shulchan Aruch. Here, let's bring this up. Opening up another document that I have, that we have, this was not ready for print, but let's see if we could find this over here. So he wrote over there, Let's see if we could find it. Do I have it? Oh, I can't find it. I'm going to get it for you next time. But he writes over there that that was divided. Now, the printers took it away. However, by mistake, and this is in Chelek Even Ha'ezer, I forget which siman. By mistake, these words were left in Ad Kan Yom Chaf Aleph. So if somebody could do the research and let me know which Chelek of Even Ha'ezer it is, but what happened is the whole halacha got messed up. I think it has something to do with Pesach, and you could understand the halacha. He's talking about different days, and he says, I think they crossed out, if I'm not mistaken, they crossed out Kan, and they wrote whatever it is, Ad Yom Chaf Aleph, and that became incorporated in the halacha. So now you know how mistakes happen. Comes along the Sefer Mitzvah Me'iras Einayim, who is the Sma. I don't know how you pronounce it. I think you pronounce it the Sma. Savior Rabbi Yeshua Folk. What do we do? English or Hebrew? We'll do the English. Rabbi Yeshua Folk, 1555 to 1614, who wrote a major Pirush on Chelek Even Ha'ezer, and he writes over there, you know what? You guys got it all wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. This has nothing to do with the halacha ad Yom Chaf Aleph, which makes absolutely no sense. Look into the Sma. The Sma writes and brings down from his Akdama, and in his introduction, he says that Rabbi Yosef Karo, when he wrote Shulchan Aruch, he wanted us to know it Baal Peh. Once again, Dvarim Shebal Peh. Dvarim Shebal Peh, you don't write it down, but he wanted it should be Baal Peh, and therefore what was really written over here was Ad Kan, and these printers took it away. Look it up in the Smeh. With this, I'd like to conclude. Last night, I saw something on YouTube, and it was a conversation between my very good friend, the Bala Mechaber, Itchi Kaduzi, Rav David Taub, and his brother, Rav Sheis Taub. And it was time a conversation. Rav Sheis Taub said something so interesting. I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but here you have the Hayom Yom. We talked about the Hayom Yom before. And he said a vart, and I like to say that this actually has a connection to what we're talking about. We're talking about the difference between Baal Peh and why it's important that it remains Baal Peh. So one of the things we said is the difference between static and dynamic. Static means it stays still. So Rabbi Sheis Taub said, interesting thing. If you look into Hayom Yom and you go to the introduction, I never saw this before. I never really paid attention to it. Luach Ar Zarua L'Chasidei Chabad. I don't know if you see it. Luach Ar Zarua L'Chasidei Chabad. So he has said that you have Divrei Torah, you have Vertlach. There's no such thing as a Vertel. There we go again. There's no such thing as a Vertel in Chabad. It's what it is. It's a Nekuda. What is a Vertel? What's a Dvar Torah? Somebody comes along and says something really nice, and that's it. It's finished. It doesn't grow. It's finished. It's a nice thing. You got a good chap. Like I said, the chap before with the Seder is Soy, Drush, and Remez, and not the Pshat. That's a Vertel. You're not going to grow with that. When the Rebbe put together Hayom Yom, the idea was it could be just one line, 2 lines or something. It's a Nekuda. It's a point that has to grow. It's just a starting point for your day, but you have to live with it the whole day. You have to grow with it. Or Zarua, it's a light that's planted. That's what the Zariya is. If you have something in a sefer And all it is a sefer. I toiled, I put together on Mavi L'Sefer Rambam, and where is it? It's on a bookshelf somewhere. That's it. However, if you talk about it, if we do, let's say, this Zoom class on Hamavi L'Sefer Rambam, I'd love to do that also, then it becomes dynamic. Then it's room to grow. And that's what the Torah is about, but really not so fast. And the next year, we'll continue with this idea and see the difference in hashkafa between Sfard and Ashkenaz and how it affects everything that we have in our Torah, in our learning Gemara and Halacha. By the way, one thing I did want to mention before that is just when we're talking about static versus dynamic. So what's the word halacha? Think about it. Halacha means going. You're going, you're moving, the opposite of static. So that's what halacha is. Doesn't mean that halacha is changing, but it is changing in a way that, for example, the halacha in this one community is like this, and the different community is like this, or things change, times that we have right now with coronavirus. What was a halacha? The halacha was before, and you're supposed to go to shul. And now the halacha is that you're not supposed to go to shul. And the halacha is all different things that we're doing. So that's halacha. We're going. That's what we have to go with. But it is something which is dynamic. Once again, if you have any questions, info@shazak.com. Please ask me the questions. If you want anything, you have any special things that you want to do. I also do have a WhatsApp group. If you go on my website, which is shazak.com, and I don't know if you see this, things look familiar over here, but the main thing is, please donate. No, I'm just joking. If you want to WhatsApp me, just press this button over here, shazak.com, and Parshas Emer. Press this button, and it should take you to a WhatsApp. Or if you want to join the WhatsApp group of Shazak, and then I could put you on Sfarim V'Sofrim. Just say you want to be on Sfarim V'Sofrim. And that's that. So I want to wish everyone a good Shabbos. And with this, we conclude. Everyone stay safe. Besuras Tovos.